Hello everyone! I am the Last Omnitect, your favorite robot American. This is Unicorn Head Studios, my TTRPG world-building channel. And welcome to the next session of Omni Makes Legacy First Flight. Today is Death Spirals and Exploding Dice, as we work on building mechs, aerospace craft, and talking about base mechanics of Legacy First Flight. Hope you're all doing well today. I am just getting down to it. So, finally back from my hike. Mossy, it's great to see you. Mossy, I am Spartacus. It's good to see you, pal. So, I figure we'll do our little ritual that we've been doing lately. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I can transfer a photo of a photo, and hopefully you guys can see that. And hopefully that'll work. Effective as of today, there are a total of 84 days left until I have to have Legacy First Flight ready to go, at least in manuscript form. And that's a lot, guys. That's a lot to do. But man, it's gonna be worth it. Or am I Alfarius? No, Mossy, I'm Alfarius. We all know how this goes. God, YouTube's UI changes are so bad, but Legacy is worth navigating it. Thank you so much. It's good to see you. Alright, well, everyone pull up a chair, because today we're going to be doing some work on Legacy. So the past couple sessions, I have been showing you guys some of the behind-the-scenes work that I've been doing in regards to rulesmithing and basic systems in the game. Today, I'm going to be doing both a combination of an art stream and rulesmithing. And that's because we've got to talk about some basic systems in Legacy. Last session I already talked about, like, some of the core tenets of Legacy First Flight, which, you know, I'll also open up another thing, too, to show you guys. But, yeah. Core tenets of Legacy First Flight. Exploding dice system, luck dice, and a death spiral. What do all these things mean for folks who are new to role-playing? I'll summarize it and keep it pretty quick. So, and if you're wondering what the heck an exploding dice system is, it means when you roll a die and you get the highest possible result, so in this case, I roll a d20 and I get a 20, I would pick this up again and roll it and add it to the first number that I rolled. If I roll another 20, I keep going. That's what an exploding dice system is. Basically, as long as you keep rolling the highest result on a die, you keep rolling it and adding it together until you finally roll something that, say, as an example, isn't the highest number, and then you add it all together. So in this instance, I rolled a 20, and a 15, so that means that I'd be looking at a grand total of 55. It means you get some truly ludicrous dice numbers in this game, but I kind of like that. I feel like in a game where I want characters to be capable of the incredible, even though 90% of the time they're just doing mundane normal stuff, I feel exploding dice works really well. Second is the concept of luck dice. This is one of those ones I gotta dig over here. I have a little dice Rolodex off the side of my table. Like literally, some people have a Rolodex for all their supplies and their, like, addresses, and me, I have a dice Rolodex. And of course I grabbed the only D6 in there that was actually a D3. There we go. So, an exploding dice system has been explained. A luck dice system is literally where you'll have a D, in this case, whatever your attribute die is, but you will also roll a second die. In the case of my system, I usually choose a D6. So, if I had an attribute that was ranked to a D8, which means I would roll a D8 for whatever discipline or stat roll I needed to make for that regarded that attribute, I'd roll a D8, and I'd roll a D6 at the same time. I then take whichever is higher. So in this case, I rolled I believe I rolled a 5, and the other one was a 3. Hold on, those sort of fell weirdly. There we go. Oh, that's even better. So, in this case, I rolled a 2 on my D8, but I actually just rolled a 6 on the D6. Because this is an exploding dice system, I then roll that die again, the D6, and I got a 3. Which means my total results were, I can choose to either use, for some reason, the 2, sometimes people do want to roll lower, or I could use the total of 9 that I got off of the D6 that exploded. That's how a luck dice system works. It's a mechanism by which you can manage dice mechanics. Keeps things pretty straightforward. So you have more chances not to suffer, I approve. Kind of, yeah. The way that I think about it is, this doesn't remove dice anomalies, but it helps mitigate them in a way that makes the game, I don't want to say less punishing, but more average. So, everyone who's played Dungeons & Dragons will know the feeling, or any system where you have like a singular die that you roll, where you're like, on average, I should get this result, right? I just need to roll a 2+ on a d6, which is a 5 in 6 chance. It's practically guaranteed. Or I just need to roll over a 3 on a d20. It's a ludicrously low percentage. And then you roll it, and you roll nothing but the worst possible result over and over again. If you have been rolling 2 dice, the likelihood of you rolling that worst possible result is significantly lower. It's why if you ever play a tabletop war game and it's like choose between either having roll on a 4+ or roll on a 5-up rerollable, take 5-up rerollable. It's technically, statistically, slightly more likely than a 50% chance. However, it doesn't remove dice shenanigans, which is something I didn't want to do. I don't want to bubble wrap my players away from all consequence. Instead, it makes it so that if a dice anomaly happens, it's actually kind of a little funnier, and it makes it much clearer that it is, in fact, a failure. So, a little bit less chaotic in that way. Massive die, terrible result. It's why I take 2d6 over 1d12. Yeah, there's a reason why, if anyone out there is wondering why great swords and great weapons in D&D tend to be 2 smaller dice instead of a big die. That's why, statistically speaking, you take the higher average when you take 2 dice that are smaller, but add up to a total result of the larger die. So 2d6 or 1d12, 2d6 will roll better. The lowest possible roll is a 2, and the highest possible roll is also a 12. And statistically speaking, your average roll on 2d6 is a 7, whereas your statistically average roll on a 1d12 is actually a 6, usually. Again, statistics are weird, and I'm not particularly well versed in them, but that's more or less how it shakes out. It's slightly more statistically likely on 2 dice. So, that's that part. And then finally, the last component part of Legacy that I wanted to... second last part of the component of Legacy that I wanted to discuss today is the idea that you also have moats of Legacy in the system. So what's a moat? What's a moat? Let's show you guys. I'm actually going to open up the core beta book document here, and we're going to show you all a little bit of what that is. So, I'm going to pop this over to Canvas. Beautiful. I love when the computer's working well today. It's lovely. It's doing great. I want to see that outline. Beautiful. So, moats. Moats in Legacy are built around the idea of having... Do I have moats written down in the core rules yet? I should. I should have those moats written down already. I don't. My God. I need to add that in. See, this stuff like this is why I'm going back and redoing these documents. So a moat of Legacy is a core component of your character's character sheet. I guess we can open that then. At least I know that's here. So let's open up our character sheet. We've got the character sheet Mark III Final. It's the old one, but it'll do. So you can actually see down here your Moats of Legacy and Sparks of Legacy. Moats are basically a player resource. So these are like mulligans or bennies in Savage Worlds. You get a certain fixed number of them per session, and it's equal to your Sparks of Legacy. We'll get to the Sparks shortly, but let's just say that Legacy is the core mechanic of the game Legacy. What a surprise. Truly the most core mechanic of all. Moats of Legacy, since you refresh them every session, are kind of a player resource you can use to achieve unique abilities, you can use them to reroll dice pools, and you can also use them to, if you burn all of them for the day, prevent instant death, or just any cause of death, once. It doesn't perfectly save you, but it's kind of like passing your death saving roll with a natural 20 in D&D, or in other systems where it's like I critically succeeded on my not dying roll. It means you don't die. You're stabilized until the end of the scene. Which is a really helpful thing if your character does something really stupid, or just something really unforeseen or really unfortunate happens. And you're like, I don't want to die because, I don't know, my doofus character tripped on a wooden plank and then fell onto a nail, and then it went right through his spine. No, you can burn all your motes and be like, no, it missed that, but it still hurts and your character's unconscious for a while. It doesn't prevent you from being double-tapped, though, so in combat you need to use it in conjunction with other abilities. So, moats let you reroll dice. That's the big takeaway here. They also let your character use other character abilities, such as the Oraname's ability to regenerate once a day, and Anazali's ability to ask you specifically about, like, as a GM, any advice that you might have. For the record, it doesn't tell you exactly where to hit them or give you a dice bonus. It's just narrative advice. And other similar abilities. So, those are your motes. Sparks are the next part. Sparks are the big part of Legacy that's most relevant. So, Legacy First Flight has always been built around the idea that your character can change the world, can change the galaxy. It isn't that other people can't, but your character is uniquely positioned in a way to do so. And so, your character's spark is exactly that mechanism by which they do so. It is the thing that lets them... We'll have this to learn then. It's the thing that lets them affect the world, the galaxy, in a way no one else can. And so, what you can do with sparks is significantly more limited. What a spark does is lets you, a certain number of times per campaign, share storytelling with the GM. So, let's say, this is the example I always use. Let's say your characters are fighting in a war. You take a fortress. It was a hard-fought battle, and you really don't want to lose that fortress. You think it could turn the tide of the war. So you could have your character expend a spark of legacy and say, after having conquered that fortress, you could say, we will not lose this fortress for the rest of the war. This fortress stays in our hands. And you and the GM can go, okay, stand up from the table, go have a chitty chat about it, and then come back to the table and say, okay, this is how this works. This is a fixed point in history. This is a canon event, if we're using the Spider-Verse realm-like equivalency. This is a thing that will not change. The GM cannot dance around it. The players cannot affect it. It is a permanent part of the canon. And so your character, having spent that spark of legacy, guarantees that that fortress stays in your possession. And in fact, it becomes a pivotal turning point in that war, moving forward. It might even stay long into the future. So that's kind of the really convenient part of what Sparks of Legacy do. They codify player impact as a mechanic. But they also serve a secondary purpose. For anyone out there who's played Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, or any fantasy game that has an epic destiny mechanism, where your character has like this big super future special destiny, Legacy lets you make that yourself. You see, whenever your character expends a spark of legacy, and this is where we go back to the screen so you guys can see what I'm talking about, every time you guys spend a spark of legacy, down here, it permanently reduces your motes of legacy on the far side. Furthermore, every time you spend a spark of legacy, it slowly counts down your character's ability to stay in the campaign. Your character is expending their ability to affect the universe as a whole. Until eventually your character hits 0 sparks of legacy. When your character hits 0 sparks of legacy, they retire from being a player character. They go to being an NPC, maybe they ride off into the sunset, they're never seen again, maybe they just join your crew as a background character, they've had enough field work, maybe they die. It's up to you to decide how your character goes. You have 1 session left to do it when you hit level 0 on your sparks. Any way to regain sparks, like by taking traits. There are no ways to regain sparks in Legacy. It is the permanent clock on your character. At least, and this is a big one, barring GM caveat. I recommend GMs only hand out sparks of legacy in the rarest of circumstances. I'm talking something truly spectacular. Your character would have to do something incredible, but there's no traits you can take to expend it. The closest you can do is play a click. Click start with an extra spark. It's kind of one of the big, like, click are kind of an extreme thing. They're a species of millipedes, so their arms aren't perfectly adapted for holding weapons, so anything they want to use has to either get a mod pack or they have to clumsily hold it with all their paddles. They don't move as quickly, but they run faster. Click are very much a case of all or nothing. They're kind of the weird species. Like, every game system has that one species that kind of, you're all in on that species. Click, you're kind of all in on them. And this is part of it. In many ways, the Click face a lot of hurdles, but they gain a lot of abilities other characters don't have. And one of those is an extra spark. Your character can theoretically make more change. But it's about the only way in rules you can do it. And you can only do that at character creation when you make a click character. Or you be me and make her click the weapon. I mean, yes, true. Now, here's the other trick. There is one other way, I guess, to get sparks. And this is something I should share with you guys. This is the other reason it's called Legacy. In Legacy First Flight, one of the things that I wanted to encourage was when characters die, for GMs and players to have something to look forward to. Anyone who's ever played a TTRPG would know how moderately traumatizing it is to have your character die. You know, maybe you could have planned it, but even then, it's an emotional whirlwind. People will say that it isn't, but it is. Unless you're playing like a one-shot and you have truly no connection to that character, which is very rare, you will, by inhabiting someone's mind space, someone's persona, you start to care about them. You give a damn. And when they die, it hurts a lot. And it can be debilitating for some players. I've known players that when their character died, they were like, okay, I'm done. It was a great game. I've had enough. And they walk away. And I understand it completely. I want to encourage players to have something to be excited about. So, your character, when they die, can leave behind a legacy. Now, in this case, a character legacy is something that you, when you're making your new character, can build towards. The way that it works is simple. When your character dies, especially if your character dies suddenly, or, you know, as a result of, like, combat, or just random dice bullshit, or some sort of catastrophe that's unforeseen, your character can leave behind a legacy, and you can make your next character, and if you narratively tie it into that first character, have them step not directly into the shoes of or replace them, but continue the story of that character. Say, the example I always use is, let's say a detective is looking for someone who died, and they get murdered. They're looking for justice for somebody, and they die. Maybe it's their brother or sister. Maybe another detective follows up on the death of the first one, finds out the conspiracy, and gets invested. They're here to continue that trail of justice. Or maybe you have family. Maybe a character died, but their family hears about it. And then before you know it, you have this new character showing up going, hey, I want to do right by that person. Maybe your character impacted someone immensely in their journeys, and that character's moved by the death of that other character and wants to step into those shoes. That, when you do it, gives the GM a significantly easier time telling the story, because it means that they don't have to be as worried about, oh no, all those aborted arcs, all that stuff I was planning for the other character. Now they have a place to rehome it into this new character. And in exchange for being so accommodating to the GM, continuing your original character story in this new form, you get any of the remaining sparks of legacy that other character had. If they didn't spend any at this point, then you would probably just get, like, I figure it's -1, so that way players don't just, like, kill their characters and do it a couple times so they can get a bunch of sparks. But it's a great way to get a lot of buffs. Last stand of a character in Delta Green I played. Nice. Yeah, no, we've all had those characters. I've literally, when I was playing in Covet Syndicate on DMDM Studios, Necronomulus, for those of you who follow him still, having Ashwell die was really, it sucked. But I had been kind of planning with Derek to do something with his character when he died. And so when Ashwell passed, he came back like Ashwell the White as a warlock, actually, reforged from the weapon he used to carry. And so he came back as a Hexblade. Literally Dr. Manhattan back to life by his weapon. And in doing so, we were able to continue his story from a new angle that gave both me and Derek a more fun time. And so I think that is the best possible thing you can have happen with character death. When a character dies, the story doesn't have to end. And character legacies allow you to leave things for the next people. Theoretically, you could even carry a character legacy off into a new campaign. If you ran one campaign, you ended it, you sit down with a new campaign, sometime later, picking up where the last one ended off, or some period afterwards. I would highly encourage GMs to consider offering players the opportunity to pick up character legacies. And it doesn't even have to be their own. They can say, hey, we had a fun time playing. Maybe this next time I want to make a character tied to your character's backstory, because I thought that was cool. Or your character's impact on the galaxy. That's what character legacies are designed to do. So, all that is kind of all the basics of the system, with one final caveat, and that, my friends, would be the death spiral. That would be trauma. And so we're going to take a moment to talk about what trauma is. So, as I pop on over to combat, trauma, here we go. So, trauma, death, and dying. Okay. So, your character has a certain amount of trauma built onto their character sheet, as just like a baseline. You guys can actually even see it. Whoa, don't worry, you'll see that in a minute. So you have a trauma rating here on your character, and a maximum trauma rating. This represents your character's ability to suffer injury. Unlike in a lot of other games where you have a pool of hit points that ticks down, in Legacy, your character has a threshold of damage they can build up to. Injury is a thing you acquire, not a thing you always have. Think of it as like a burn. If anyone's familiar with the ratings on the burn system, don't look it up if you're squeamish. Or at least don't look it up on Google Images, good God. But, as a general rule of thumb, burns go from level 0, where you have no burn, level 1, where you have a mild surface level burn, that's like a mild sunburn, not that bad, or like you gently singed your finger, not enough to form a boil or any blisters yet. 2 is significantly worse, where you have like possibly blisters or more severe damage. And then you get to 3rd degree burns, where we're talking about life-altering injuries. And 4th degree burns are basically amputation via fire. So in Legacy, we don't use the exact same mechanism, but close enough. Your character has a maximum trauma rating. This equates to how much injury you can acquire before your character just nopes out. And so in this particular instance, you start with a trauma rating of 0. Your character has no trauma rating under most circumstances. They're healthy enough. They're doing fine. Maybe like, a hitch or something, but trauma represents serious or significantly affecting injury. Your character's max is how high that number can climb. Whenever your character takes damage, they have a toughness value. So, unlike in Dungeons & Dragons, where I roll 8 damage, my character will take 8 damage. In Legacy, if I roll 8 damage, I consult my character's toughness. Let's say their toughness is 5. I would reduce that 8 down to 3, because 8 minus 5 is 3. And that would be the total amount of damage that spills over to become actual trauma. This would also factor in armor, which is just like toughness that can be modified. So, basically, all characters have damage reduction in Legacy. Most injuries they take, they'll probably shrug off. If you get hit with a baseball bat and you're wearing, like, body armor, your character might literally have a high enough toughness where it'll be annoying, but not actually injuring in any meaningful mechanism or in any meaningful way. And so, as a result, as trauma spills over, it approaches your max. Trauma is a -1 penalty to all your attribute rolls. And by the way, in Legacy, almost everything's an attribute roll. There are a couple things that aren't. Ranged damage, as an example, has its own non-attribute damage. And likewise also tables. If you're rolling on a table, that's not attribute. But other than that, everything else is an attribute. So if I have 3 trauma, that means my character is at a -3 penalty to all my rolls. It's pretty easy. This does mean that while your character might be capable of surviving more injury before they start getting to life-threatening levels of seriously having their health compromised and starting to die or fight for their life, it does mean that your character is going to be really hurting by the time you get there. So, if your character has like a max trauma rating of 9, by the time that they're passing out from their injury, they are really roughed up. We're talking invincible levels of they got screwed up by somebody. And so, that's kind of how trauma rating works. Once you go above your max trauma rating, you get into death and dying. This is kind of that whole death spiral thing. A death spiral mechanic in a TTRPG means, as your character becomes more injured or more stressed, it becomes harder for them to do tasks. This means that they're more likely to fail rolls, which means they're more likely to accrue injury, which means they're more likely to die. So that's what a death spiral is. In this case, for Legacy, once your character's trauma eclipses their maximum trauma, they begin struggling. Struggling is something they do at the start of every turn in what's called their upkeep phase. If you're familiar with Magic the Gathering, then you're familiar with what that term means. It's the refresh step at the start of every player's individual turn during a round, where they resolve anything that might be sitting on them before they do their actions. This test is basically to stay conscious. So when they're struggling to stay awake. It's an endurance check with a target number of 4. But remember, your trauma is a negative modifier. So you will be rolling whatever your endurance is minus however much trauma your character's accrued. And that includes anything that goes above that maximum trauma. If you fail, they pass out and immediately begin fighting for their life. Fighting for your life is what our death roll is in Legacy. At this point, it's a willpower check with a target number of 4. But it's completely unmodified. That includes from trauma. Your character is officially beyond the point where that injury matters to them. They are dancing on the edge of life and death. A target number of 4 is pretty easy to achieve. But at the same time, anytime you roll a die, bad things can happen. So, you take the start of that test of every upkeep. If you succeed, you stay unconscious, but you have to keep fighting for your life. If you critically succeed, you stabilize and you remain unconscious for D4 hours, and you lose the fighting for your life condition. It'll basically remove your trauma, it'll bring your trauma back to right up below your maximum trauma. If you fail, your character dies. This is that point where you can spend all your motes that you currently have for the session and go, I don't want to die, and then you don't. Your character goes, okay, you critically succeed effectively on your fighting for your life test. You don't even have to worry about it. Technically, you don't even need to have to roll, but you can, and you can use it in response to failing that roll. Just be aware, to do it, you have to burn all your motes, so it's a one-off. And so that's kind of the core mechanics of the system, in a nutshell. So you have exploding dice, luck dice, you have motes of legacy, which are rerolls, and also a character resource that can be used for many other things. Sparks of legacy, which are both your character's epic destiny and a mechanism by which your character generates motes, as well as the ability to pass on your character's traits to other newer characters. And then finally, trauma, death and dying, and the death spiral that follows it. I think that's a pretty good summary of the core rules of Legacy's basic systems of play. I also figure we'll take a little moment here and show you guys a little something I've been working on the side. So, in addition to a lot of the stuff that I've been working on rules-wise, I've also been doing a fair bit of art. I've been doing that mostly on my other channel, which is my Last Omnitect, the Last Omnitect YouTube channel. You guys will see my updates on my Discord for it all the time, on all my socials. It isn't something that hasn't been talked about ad nauseum. But I've also been doing a little bit of visual design behind the scenes. In addition to actually writing the game, the core rules, and doing art for the individual things, I've also been doing things like, say, for example, and I want to put this here at the very bottom, so I can just quickly... Sure, we'll make that just pitch black. Guess I need to put the thing here? Oh, I guess I need to put just a giant black box behind it. Okay, that'll do. There we go. And I can put that on the other side. Cool, so now I can show you guys what I'm talking about. I've actually been designing logos and such for Legacy for quite some time, actually. These are vector elements that I'm going to be using in the actual book. So as an example, this one here is the logo for the Prism, which is it's basically the space internet in Legacy First Flight. So this is the logo that you would see anytime you're in that setting. Really, really proud of this one, actually. I've also done a couple others, including the Free Marches of Legacy, the JSA, Joint Syndicate Authority, and there's a couple others I've been working on as well. This is just there, though. If you're interested in seeing the actual thank you, Mossy, I appreciate you with that. In addition to what I've been doing here, I've also been working on the actual book itself. And so in this, I wanted to take a little moment and zoom in and give you a little quick peek behind the scenes. This is the current, I guess you could say this is like the rough manuscript of the narrative crawl for Legacy. So you're all familiar with the Star Wars narrative scrolling crawl, or the big scrolling crawl that you see for like Warhammer 40k and the Grim Darkness of the 41st Millennium, or, you know, in a galaxy far, far away. This is mine. So, let's take a little moment and give it a proper read. I'm going to turn off my webcam for this, so we can actually properly read it. So, it is the year 24XXAD. After centuries of turmoil, humanity has bravely ventured from its home on Earth. Bound by shared hope, we strode into the stars together under the banner of the Commonwealth of Humankind. Now the peoples of the 8 sapient species of the Galactic Union tirelessly strive to maintain a delicate peace that has endured for 2.5 millennia. Starships fold space-time to cross the impossible gulf separating stars. Matter printers forge abundant base elements on a molecular level into food, shelter, clothing, tools, and more. The Prism, a sprawling public galactic communications network, allows the distant worlds of the Union instantaneous communication and sharing of knowledge. Mighty terraforming engines change barren, lifeless rocks into a thriving garden world within the span of a decade. It is a time of wonders, but it dances on the edge of a knife. While the 8 member species of the Union may be at peace, the true scale of the galaxy is vast, and most of its trillions of peoples live far from the influence of their homeworlds. Pocket empires, nation-states, and free marches are scattered outside of the Union's territory. Dictators, pirates, fascists, and cults prey upon these isolated regions, creating a steady drumbeat of exploitation and violence that Union peacekeepers fight to contain. And on the next page, yet the greatest threats faced by the galaxy are shrouded in its past. The Union is the latest civilization to stretch across the galaxy, but it grows in a graveyard of those that came before. The Anazali Empire, the Tyrant Sectori, the Wanderers in the Dark. The rise and fall of galactic society has played out countless times. Inevitably, each collapse was so complete and sudden that any records are lost to posterity, leaving the twilight of these empires a matter of grim historical speculation. But while their history is lost to us, within undiscovered ruins that lay hidden beneath our feet on countless worlds, their ancient works persist. Weapons of unimaginable scale, ancient threats locked away in fear, technologies beyond our wildest dreams. If the galaxy is to endure, these hidden ruin worlds must be discovered and charted, and their troves of relics cataloged, lest they be unleashed on the Union. So the Union sends out voyagers, teams of seasoned explorers, mercenaries, and specialists. They are the very best and brightest the Union can offer, each having already encountered ancient technology. You are a voyager, and what you do will change the galaxy forever. And that, my friends, is the crawling sprawl of Legacy First Flight. I've been working on this stuff for a while now, and it's really awesome to start seeing it actually appear in book format. This is going to be 2 of the pages in the book, so I am super hyped for that. I cannot begin to tell you. So, all this has been going on behind the scenes while I have been working on the rules. Because this isn't just a matter of making a document that you guys can play the game off of. This is a matter of making a book and a PDF that you guys can actually enjoy. And that's going to take time and effort, but man, it's going to be worth it. I'm so excited for it. So, let's take a moment over here as I pop on over. And today we're going to do something a little fun. Legacy back in book form. Yes. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to get that done. So, I figure I should let everybody know as well that I've actually managed to score myself something that I was really excited about. I managed to score myself a publisher. That's right. After years of working on this, 20 years of making this game, and laying out all the rules and having dozens of hundreds of like pages of errata and cliff notes, I finally got a publisher. And I've been talking with them, which is also why I can actually start laying out the book. They gave me their publishing template for what the pages, the gutter space, the margin spaces have to be in order for it to get published correctly. So I am super fucking psyched. Thank you so much, Sailing Ships. I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. My current plan, and I know I talked about it a little bit last stream, but I want to talk about it again with all of you guys, is that my current trajectory for producing Legacy is as follows. And I actually have a little document here that I'll share in my own little private Discord server that I just sort of have on my own here, just to make my own thing. Okay, so, in terms of producing Legacy and getting things going, my goals are in Q1 of next year, so I go by quarters just to keep things easy for me. In terms of going by quarters, here we are. Okay. So, February 7th, I'll have the complete core rulebook document complete, the manuscript complete, and in the hands of my players. That'll be all of you guys. So, once I got that done, I'll be moving on to the next step, which is going to be early to mid-February. I'll be running a closed beta for my Patreon supporters. Again, anyone who's interested in supporting my channel maybe might consider going over to patreon.com/Last Omnitect. If you go there, you don't have to support me by actually subscribing, though please subscribe because I need money and I'm not, like, monetized on YouTube. Have you seen this channel? It's very small. But, in addition to getting a bunch of free behind-the-scenes looks at Legacy as I'm going to be working on it, as well as also access to my entire webcomic archive, if you support it, you get access to my webcomics 2 weeks early, and you'll also gain free access to my beta documents and be part of that beta test come February. Also, quick shout out to my awesome patrons, Ampersand, Atlas, Heinrich, Necronomius, Souls Rolls, and Mossy the Mighty. You all are incredible, and I wouldn't be able to do this without you. Thank you all so much. Again, patreon.com/Last Omnitect. I'm not sponsored by anybody, so I have to sponsor myself. So, anyhow, rolling it back in, I did wonder if that's why you started laying out the pages. It is. I didn't want to do a bunch of work before I knew what I was doing, and so that's part of it. Now that I have a publisher lined up and I know what they need to make the book actually real, which, by the way, I'm also really excited to work with them because they're just awesome. I'll give more details about it come, like, February when I have my formal final sit down with them and be like, hey, let's get this going, let's see what we need to do. So, just be aware, I have a publisher, they're excited to be involved, I just need to have more to give them so we can actually make a timeline. But in the meantime, I'm making a timeline based on my presumptive success. So, let's just say pressure helps. So, early to mid-February, run a closed beta for my Patreon supporters. You guys will be able to download the document, or I'll have a publicly accessible Google Doc that you guys can have access to and use there. And I'll collect a lot of gameplay and editing feedback. This is where you guys will help me out. I'm poor. It's fine. I'm not angry about it. I'm just not rich. It's fine. What it does mean, though, is that I have to crowdsource a lot of my work. Or I need to do it all myself. For 20 years, I've been doing it myself. And that's not easy. But you guys can give me a hand. If you have the time and energy, please don't overextend yourself. I can't pay folks for labor, and as a result, anything you guys give me is a gift. And I endlessly appreciate all of it. Never feel compelled to do so. Never feel like you have to. Just being here to support me is an incredible amount. But anyone who does read through the book, provide me with editing, feedback, or any suggestions for layout or anything, please feel free. When the document actually drops in February, you'll get yourself an actual, like, producer's credit in the book. I want to make sure everyone who helps me make this book gets credited. So all my paying patrons, you'll get credited. And anybody who gives me feedback, you'll also get credit in editing. So just be aware of that. Misheard that as bored, not poor. I am not bored. I am wired to the edge of my gills in terms of what I have to do. But, yeah, no, definitely. So, that'll be early to mid-Feb. Late February, I'm going to do my final editing and balance passes of the game system. And I'll have my final meetings with my publisher to get the final estimates and talk the turkey on the specifics of the print run. I'm also probably going to start dropping hints of the Kickstarter around then. I'm not sure if it's going to be a Kickstarter. I do need to do some form of crowdfunding in order to actually produce it. Because here's the next step. The next step in second quarter is the actual marketing and funding push. You see, again, I am poor. And that means I can't afford to drop $3,000, $4,000 on a print run myself. Now, the awesome producers that I'm going to be working with, the awesome publishers I'm working with, who I personally know, they're not a big corporation. They're actually a small team, which I'm really excited about working with. Super diverse, awesome people. They are up in Quebec, Indigenous, LGBTQ. If you've already put together 2 and 2 as to who I'm talking about, that's great. I don't want to drop their name till I have it in writing, just to make sure there's no pressure on their part or on mine. But just be aware, I think those people are awesome, and even if nothing happens, I still will shout their names to the sky once February comes around. Even though they're willing to work with me on a lot of stuff, including, for the record, getting a French localization version of it done so they could sell it to their friends in Quebec and anywhere else that speaks French. And one day I'd like to get a Spanish, localization done, but we'll get there when we get there. In the meantime, they will be helping me arrange a lot of stuff. But I still am going to need that base seed money to get things printed. So, I need to raise some funds. So in around April, I'm going to be kicking off a huge marketing campaign. I'm going to start a multi-part mini-series on YouTube. I'm actually looking at it right now. Fun fact, I kind of cut into my personal budget pretty hard with this, but I got some filming equipment. Not a lot, but enough to start doing proper vlogging, which you're going to start seeing show up on here and on Unicorn Head Studios. So those will be on 2 different sides of it. What you guys are seeing here is a live stream. These will be properly polished and edited videos, done by me. I'll give it my best shot. Can't afford an editor yet, but one day when I can, I expect to do them more often and better. But this is going to be me having fun with it. So, I'm planning on doing that. Likewise also, I will do another... I'll basically be doing 2 3-part miniseries on YouTube. Some about the narrative, and the other about the actual process of making it. I'll also be continuing with a bunch of social posts, and then I'll launch a crowdfunding campaign to pay for it. The estimated costs I've heard are going to be roughly between $3,000 and $4,000, approximately. That's for a pretty solid print run. My goal is, I would like to get a few hundred of the, softcover versions printed, and probably about 200 of the hardcovers. I'm going to put the hardcovers under a stretch goal, kind of. So right now my current stretch goals are the follow. I have a base production cost of 300 softcover books. The hardcover production costs for about 200 plus books because, fun fact, when you're getting things printed, economy of scale significantly matters. So printing softcovers is a lot easier for some folks than it is printing a hardcover. Hardcovers have a lot more labor and a lot more effort that goes into them. So in order to make those cost effective, I would need to get about 200 of those hardcover books published. So first goal is the basic production cost. Second is a push for hardcovers, if anyone wants hardcover variants. The next one will be, if I go past hardcovers and we keep sailing on, I would love to do a limited first edition cover variant of the hardcover run, just for folks who are super into the game and they want to have the original hardcover. They want to have hey, this is the OG Legacy version, Mark 1, put it on their shelf, have it as a little collector's item. I want to do that for you guys. I'll have special art for it, a special cover, as I get towards it. And then finally, the last super huge stretch thing, which I'm still in talks with people about, but maybe getting, say, buildable miniatures for the different species of Legacy. Not a huge amount, but maybe a simple sprue that people can make their characters off of. Assuming I can get in contact with a good 3D printer, which I've already got a couple of candidates lined up. It's really going to come down to their availability and the costs involved, whether it's feasible or not. But it's a thing I'd really like to do. If I could squeeze it, even if I couldn't get production myself, I'd love to have a 3D printable file that become available for folks, so they could actually have their own proper miniatures for Legacy First Flight. Because unfortunately, as much as I love my many species, the biggest hurdle I have with them on a tabletop environment is, well, there's no real easy way to say it. I don't have a... I don't have anything that equates to these guys. You have to do a lot of kit bashing to make Legacy miniatures. And while I'm 100% all on board with it, I'm never going to be the sort of person that doesn't let folks bring their own miniatures to the table. But if I'm being real with you guys, it'd be a lot easier for folks to play my game in a tabletop environment if they didn't have to try to find some really rough approximations of these guys. Like, the Sylph alone are weird quadrupedal gorilla-like lizard people. And that'd be tough to make. The Shrike are eyeless, long scoop-mouthed, four-armed, 12-foot-tall things. They're basically Hork-Bajir with extra arms and no eyes from Animorphs. The Oriname are jellyfish people, which there's actually not that many of those on the market. And the Clicker Millipedes. The Acres have weird wings. Like, there's absolutely ways to kit bash these guys. But if I could make a stretch goal where I could just have it where that's not a thing you guys would have to worry too much about, where I could offer you some equivalent, I would love that. So those are the big stretch goals. If I can get them. Big asterisks on all these, again, they're stretch goals, which means inherently they're pie in the sky, and entirely dependent on how much money I make. The likely thing that I'm aiming for is just to get the basic production costs covered, and hopefully get the hardcover production run. If I can get anything over that, that'll be grand. But those are the big goals. Following the Kickstarter completion, I'll sit down with my publisher, and we'll get to cranking them out. Third quarter is going to be final production, and with luck, we'll be finally distributing them by either end of third quarter or in fourth quarter of 2026. That is the goal. That is the dream of what it'll take to make Legacy. During this whole time, I'll be doing vlogs and videos and promos of the whole thing. So keep an eye out for that. And that's basically everything that I'm planning on doing. I think I pretty much covered everything. I can't think of anything else. So, at this point, I think we can probably open up the floor and get some suggestions, get some discussions going. So at this point, I'm going to just pop open a document that I've used a couple of times before. Because I have a Walker template, which I don't necessarily want to use entirely. Let's pop over and we'll get a little bit of art done for today. So one of the things that I wanted to work on today is I wanted to work on the playable mechs you can use in Legacy First Flight. Ooh, that was a deep one, sorry. Unfortunately, I don't have too many images of all of them together. I've drawn a couple of, like, concept doodles of them in the past, but nothing to really, like, drive home entirely what I wanted to do. So these are the walkers. These are one of the two options available to jockeys to pilot. And so right now I've got 4 of them drawn, but I have a couple of other ones floating around, and so I'm going to sort of see what I want to do. Can I ask a random question about the Veracity? They were competing with the Anazali, right? What gave the Anazali the advantage? That's a great question. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Veracity, which is probably a lot of you, because I haven't referenced them very much. Let's see if I can find an old doodle of them, because I have drawn them a couple of times. It's just been a hot minute since the last time I doodled them. Ah, here we go. So this is an old pencil and pen sketch of what the Veracity used to look like. So what gave the Anazali the edge over the Veracity? If I'm being honest, probably ruthlessness. Ruthlessness and a bit of a technological edge. So you all saw in the publisher document, when I was given the big sort of like scroll through it, there's this one part in particular where I talk about the different empires that came before. Anazali Imperial, Tyrants Sectori, the Wanderers in the Dark. Okay. Wanderers in the Dark, big black mark there. I'm not going to touch about that narratively at all. Not yet. You guys will deal with that later. The Tyrants Sectori, on the other hand, are the empire that came before the Imperial. and they're technically not one empire. The Tyrant Sectori is kind of the vague description that the Anazali used to describe the amalgamation of sector warlords that controlled the galaxy before the Anazali yoked it all under their control directly. So the Tyrant Sectori were basically dozens of different imperial hegemons scattered all across the galaxy that basically use their technology as a cudgel to enforce control. So this is where your Star Wars, like, Outer Rim level, like, massive empire thing falls under. These are your Hutts. These are the Sith Empire. This is that kind of thing where it's like, alright, these are all the guys, like, if I had to make an example to, what is it, Stargate? These are the System Lords. Not the Jaffa. Sunshine, what's the name of the guys from Stargate? The ruling alien species? They're not the Jaffa, they're the other ones, the ones that are the worms that inhabit people. Gold, thank you, gold! So that's sort of what the Tyrant Sectori were. Once the Tyrant Sectori were overthrown by the Anazali Imperial, who at the time rose up as a younger species with surprising capacity to learn and adapt, as well as also the fact that they don't age, so they kind of skip over the having to pass knowledge on to next generations to advance. They can literally just stay alive and continue to hone a craft, damn near indefinitely. Which means that Anazali engineers had a huge advantage of being able to have actually ludicrous amounts of time and practice under their belt. Other empires might have had a species-wide advantage in terms of time existing, but the Anazali can focus and specialize in ways that younger-lived species simply can't. And so, after they overthrew the Tyrant Sectori, also in part because the Tyrant Sectori were not, like, working together, they kind of had loose truces with each other, but they all hated each other just as much as they hated the people that they enslaved. The Imperial overthrew them, one sector at a time, and plundered their technology, and used it to further themselves. Which is where they ended up as the Imperial. The Verasi were old as hell, and existed during the Tyrant Sectori age as well, but they existed as a quiet, external, like, rim world civilization that wasn't really being focused on. They spread slowly across worlds, and because they spread slowly and showed no serious animosity, they weren't really an issue, until the Anazali started expanding explosively and came into conflict with them. Unfortunately for the Verasi, the Anazali, now not only armed with their own technology, but all the weapons and horror show power of the Tyrant Sectori, kind of overwhelmed the Verasi. Honestly, it's impressive the Verasi held out for as long as they did. And the only reason they weren't overwhelmed is because their technology was wholly foreign to the Anazali. Purely biological. The Verasi grew their technology. It's still technology. It involves circuitry and wiring and things of that nature, but where we lay that down with copper wire, they literally grow their technology in orchards. Their weapons are literally fruit. So, thank you, by the way, Mossy. I appreciate you. So yeah. That's what a Verasi used to look like. Technically, this would be considered like a Verasi sapling. As they get older, they become Verasi ancients, and then they become, like, the eldest ancients become just full-on trees. That's how they die. So, in a way, the Verasi are one of the few species in the galaxy that actually can match the Anazali in terms of age and specialization. Unfortunately for them, they do eventually pass on. And, unfortunately for them as well, they simply aren't as dynamic as the Anazali are. Their culture is built around slow, steady migrational patterns, whereas the Anazali are, well, imperialists. Simple as... It doesn't mean that they were doomed from the start, but it does mean that they had a very unfortunate hurdle to leap past, and they just didn't clear it. So that's the Verasi as a general rule of thumb. One day I might do stuff where you can play in those ancient empires, and if I do, the Verasi will be a playable species. I just still am feeling out how I want to handle their rules. Because on an individual level, Verasi have the ability to grow and adapt. So they're not quite shapeshifters, but they have the ability to slide their stats a little bit. Just a little bit. There's this trait called phenotypical plasticity that I've used for certain mutant characters that can slide their stats around, adapt on the fly, and they have a moderate variety of that, in addition to also having the ability to customize their own anatomy. Verasi can literally cultivate themselves, just like a tree. Then if you've ever known, like, people who've taken pears and shaped them into little Buddhas or little butts, and then sell them as a thing, Verasi can do that with their frame. Verasi can grow multiple limbs, they can grow particularly tall or short, they can be supremely thick or reedy. So I want to have the ability to customize your stats be built into the Verasi. Where the Anazali can customize their disciplines phenomenally well, the Verasi can customize their attributes particularly well. And they have the slight ability to adapt. So that's them. I figure they're also probably tough as nails and surprisingly strong, being made of actual wood. So there is that. So we've got these walkers now to work on. I know I want to carry some of them over, so let's pop over to the general market, because this is my Union Forces one. This is specifically for my player character, Paul Ampersand, also known as Ampersand Productions, who plays Louis Vuitton, the jockey in my Legacy First Flight stream on this channel. Go check the backlog. I have it on here under its own playlist. You can go ahead and take a look. I have the whole thing from when we started recording it on YouTube. Unfortunately, everything before that was on Twitch, and Twitch doesn't save those documents forever. So I want to keep a good record starting here. But yeah, this is his mech, and not emblematic of the original variant. So, in terms of basic weapon systems, the mechs I want to bring over into the core rules system are, starting with this particular one, which is, wow, that one's hideous. There we go. So, the ZPM I7 Shade. This is a Children of Iron, aka synthetic mech. So I wanted to bring this over for sure. Of course he had the flames. Yes, he did. He immediately took a fast, nimble, stealth interceptor mech and strapped a chainsaw onto it and put flamethrowers and put flames on it. Which looks badass, by the way, Paul. Don't worry, I'm not judging. So, yeah, we have the Shade, which I'm going to be bringing over. We have... I should probably make, like, a little doodle page. Let's do that. Let's make a letter page. I'll do the orientation this way. Beautiful. Okay. And I'm just going to give this a gesso layer here. Nice. Mossy, I am. I'm not. I won't judge. I can't judge. Okay. So we have these other mechs I wanted to bring over as well. So we have the MacArthur Combat Rav, which, by the way, the term Rav is a human designation. Walker is the term I use nowadays. Rav, Robotically Animated Vehicle, RAV. It was an older term. I kind of have fallen out of favor in using it. It sounds a little bit more like a off-road vehicle. I know I see RAV frequently used in, like, modern cars, and I don't like that. So I think Walker is a little bit better for this. Yeah, I think, yeah, that's what it is. Recreational active vehicle. That's not what these are. So, I have the MacArthur Combat Walker, which is like a very classic design. It's a Fiddler Crab mech, basically, so it is technically a Digidegrade mech. Mechs in Legacy are built around their method of mobility. These will affect how they move, what their defense is, and their stability, which determines what type of weapons they can carry as mechs. In addition to also, like, just having their own pre-built sort of, like, this is the amount of stuff you can slap on. The Razorwind is cool. Yeah, that one's a fun one. So the MacArthur Combat Rat is Digidegrade, technically. So that means it's better at bounding, and it actually has some advantages in boosting around. So next we have the Vassal Combat Walker. This thing is an old human design as well. This is a Plantigrade mech. They're very versatile. They're surprisingly good at basically being stable. Next we have the Reliac General Service Walker. Technically it's not a walker. This is just a construct in the strictest sense. This is a cliquish mech, actually. And so they're surprisingly stable since they've got these two wheels. Very fast, very durable. They can carry a surprising amount of weight. And then finally, the Razorwind, which you notice, sailing ships. So this is an Acris one. I'm debating whether I should even keep it as a walker. It technically is. but it actually shares more in I think it shares way more in concert with an aerospace craft. Clickobots roll out. Yeah, I love them. There's a reason they have the wheels. It's because they can move underground. The wheels give them enough clearance to move around through tunnels. As long as the wheels fit, the whole mech fits. So the Razorwind is the Acris equivalent of an F-16. It's their air superiority fighter. So, super nimble, highly modular, very efficient and fast. Doesn't have many weapon slots, but it has insanely fast speed. And it's incredibly hard to hit. And, like all aerospace craft, it can go supersonic. So, the way that I've sort of talked about these systems in the past, as I open up more and more tabs and feel my PC glaring at me angrily, so whenever I talk about like the way walkers and aerospace craft work, I tend to talk about it in terms of the basics. So here we go. Here's a couple of doodles of them. So the scale that I was working with here is that a person is one tick on a battlefield, a tick being a single square on a battlefield. So 1 inch, 1 square inch on a table. The next is walkers. Under most circumstances, walkers are a 2x2. They are basically large creatures. And in Legacy, for the record, a tick is what I would refer to as a equivalent scale. It's a rough scale, a heroic scale of measurement, which means that it's kind of what you need it to be. I usually will ballpark it where a single tick is roughly between 5 to 10 feet on average in terms of size, based on whatever scale you need it to be. And it is not a perfect representative. So the art isn't exactly accurate. This is for the sake of sanity. Anyone who's ever watched Gundam, anybody who's ever watched Gundam or any giant robot show will know exactly what I'm talking about. Whenever you watch anime with giant robots, I want you to compare the scale of like, and I mean older ones, not newer ones, usually. Nowadays they can get really granular with the scale. But the older ones, the scale was all over the place. Is a Gundam 15 stories tall and destroying like sky, like blasting through downtown and knocking over buildings? Is it like just 3 stories tall and basically just the size of your average apartment building? Is it, hundreds of stories tall and like literally striding through skyscrapers? It'll vary. Different shows have like a very variable scale of height. And so for Legacy and the convenience of both my players and my GMs, the scale is what it needs to be. Scale's weebly wobbly. Yeah, it's fudgy, but that's by design. Because the only thing that's worse than having a question mark in a box is an incorrect answer. It's better to say the best answer is the one that works for you. So, people are 1 tick. Walkers tend to be 2 ticks wide. Some get to be 3 ticks, but almost all aerospace craft are 3 ticks wide. This is just because they're basically made to carry people, and the space they occupy, they're just a little larger. They're basically designed to be like gunships. As I pull this back over so you can all see what I'm talking about. So yeah, almost all aerospace craft fit in a 3x3 on a grid. This is because these things are landers. They're closer in comparison to a drop ship in Helldivers, the Pelican in Helldivers, the Pelican in Halo. How many Pelicans are there? So many Pelicans. The Osprey in the real world. They kind of fit that zone. And so their whole shtick is that they have not just a movement speed, a pace is what the term is in Legacy. They also have a Mach value, a modifier onto their movement. So sometimes they'll have VTOL, where they can take off and land vertically, and if they have VTOL, they can just hover around and pop in and out. I actually am going to be removing the VTOL rule, because this is one of the oldest rule sets of it. And instead, I'm just going to have it where, instead, all aerospace craft are presumed to be able to hover, as a rule of thumb. We're simply that level of technology in Legacy where using gravity anchors to hover is really common, even for, like, infantry. So the idea that an aerospace craft doesn't have some sort of gravity motor on it that'll literally just take over where a jet engine would be too much, kind of silly. But not all aerospace craft can go to Mach. And so Mach is basically... how do I describe this? So, let's say that you and I are playing a tabletop game, and we have the battlefield grid on. We have all the little minis on there, and we have a jockey piloting an aerospace craft. They're hovering over the battlefield, strafing, moving around. They're basically a float wing character at that point, or a character with the fly keyword. However, there's aerospace craft approaching. Their character can go to mock. When a character goes to mock, they're just removed from the table that turn. They literally just fly off. And there's no way we can represent that speed realistically on a tabletop scale. But what mock allows you to do is dogfight. So when your character goes off of the table into mock speed, they literally hit supersonic, they then are engaging with any other aerospace craft that might be running around out there at mock speed. Your mock value is effectively an initiative modifier for how you engage with other characters. So it's kind of the thing that lets you get into advantageous positions. It'll determine how accurately you're able to hit and how vulnerable your target is. So if you have a higher mock value than another enemy target, it means you're probably fast enough to get the drop on them and outmaneuver them. It's a rough scale, and of course, this isn't based entirely in realism. After all, in real life, there's many considerations to aircraft. A craft might have an insanely high top speed, but not be a particularly good dogfighter, or the other way around. A craft might be an incredibly good dogfighter, but not have a particularly high speed. It can be both. If it's a joint strike fighter and you have the budget of several small companies and countries to pour into it, varies. It's basically when it comes down to what have you paid for it. But that's kind of the idea. Character starts on the table, they go to mock, they boom off, they joust with enemy aircraft for a while. They can then return every other round to the table, but they'll appear at whatever facing and whatever part of the table they want, as long as they can fit and they're not interacting with terrain directly. So they literally can come, boom, strafe over the battlefield, appear from one angle, for one round, get off a number of shots, enemies can shoot them, and then they'll, boom, fly off again, and zoom all the way around. And so you have this gameplay of an aerospace craft at mock is basically strafing the battlefield in big, long passes. And whenever they're not on the battlefield making that big, long arc around, they're engaging with other aerospace craft. So it gives you a little bit of dogfighting, and it gives you a little bit of like actual tabletop fighting. So it's pretty useful. I kind of like it. It's a fun system. It also means that aerospace craft have a unique advantage against like enemy gunfire, which is simply put, they're not present on the table. So the range at which you are, basically the range at which you're engaging is kind of too far for most guns. There's only a couple of guns out there that have a range that can hit targets at mock, which my rule of thumb is a target at mock is at least 5,000 ticks away from a target. So like, it's literally measuring at this point in many kilometers. So if you have a gun that can joust out to kilometers of distance away, you have an anti-aircraft gun, and you can actually shoot at targets at mock. But you'll be at a disadvantage because it's moving really ludicrously fast. So pretty much only any weapon that either has anti-air or is like an ordnance weapon would have a chance of hitting them. So that's kind of the idea. This is sort of one of those things I've been dancing about. So I have a lot of different designs done for aerospace craft, some more complete than others. The Galapagos, the Cricket, the Falsetto. I have the Orname Isopod over here. I haven't finished the name of the Clickish one, and I'm really going to be revising that because I'm not a big fan of it. I've like reiterated it 3 to 4 times. I think this was my original take on what an Acris aerospace craft would be like. But this was an old document. And I mean old. How old are you? When was the last time I used you? Let's find out together. I want to see properties. Let's see. Last time it was modified was, oh my god, 2022. July. It has been 3 years since I touched this. This is exactly why I need these months to collate everything. I have 20 years worth of art and notes and aborted concepts that I gotta scale down to fit in a book. And here's the thing, and this is probably the hardest part so far I've had with working on Legacy, to get it ready for publishing. killing my darlings. This is a term you're going to hear a lot when you're doing any kind of, like, creative work of any kind, whether it be writing a book, making a screenplay, making a movie or a TV show, or even a YouTube series. Anytime you have to make an editing decision, when you have to think about what do I want to bring into a finite space, one of the hardest parts is acknowledging your creativity probably makes more than you can use, and intentionally not bringing it in. That's rough. It's really rough to spend hours working on something, being proud of it, and then saying it gets left on the cutting room floor. Like, it was enough where apparently Zack Snyder couldn't afford to take less than, what was it, like 4 hours to tell his story? to do the Snyder cut that everyone really wanted. Which, by the way, I watched it. It was significantly better than the original James Gunn cut, I would think. But at the same time, if you need 5 hours to 4 hours to tell your damn story, you might need an editing pass. Or 5. And so I don't have that luxury. I can't release a 500-page book with all my ideas in it. It'll never be done in a time frame that I would be happy with. I'd never be able to get it done in time for this next year. And then, frankly, it would just be exorbitantly expensive to make. And so I've come to the decision that in order to make the game happen, I have to kill a lot of my darlings. But I think the more accurate term is not to kill them, but rather put them on hold. I can always release, and I plan on, releasing expansions for specific parts of the game. So, like, a hacker's manual, soldier's manual, rig user's manual, a mech user's manual, an aerospace pilot's manual, a negotiator's manual. So that way, players who really like parts of the game, I'll be able to introduce new and cool, more specific stuff in those, and expand the game outward. Do, like, narrative setting stuff. I'm not going to do what Games Workshop and Dungeons & Dragons do, where they give you, like, 3.5 pages of rules and 40 pages of fluff, and then charge you $60 for the price, for the privilege of reading that. I want to release these as cheap, which is another thing I really like about this publisher. They're not pushing me to do that stuff. Yeah, prioritization rather than removal. That's the word. My publisher is not pushing me to cut everything. Instead, they're saying, hey, just be aware these are the costs involved in making it. You can always release new stuff afterward. They'd be happy to do that with me, too. So they're not interested in trying to over-monetize everything. They don't want to make things expensive. I'm pretty confident that if I was like, hey, I just want to release like a PDF version of these so people can print them at home, they'd be psyched. If I wanted to release them like as a zine, a personal zine, they would love that. For the record, also, I don't have a non-compete clause with them. I can make this stuff myself as well. One of the other reasons I'm really excited for working with this publisher, they're super nice about being like the only permissions we want to maintain, the only rights we want to keep in perpetuity is the ability to print more of these books so that we don't have to go back to you every time that a print run stops and go, can we print more? And I don't want that either, so I'm fine with that. But they have no issue with me working with other publishers, including myself, selling it where I want, how I want, what have you. That is a blessing, working with publishers. And one I'm very pleased with. So my goal is looking at what I want to put in the book now, and then later I'll revisit the things that I didn't put in the book and put them into these expansions. Put them into these handbooks, these smaller little guides. I'd call them codices if Games Workshop didn't completely screw over that word. Because I don't want people to think, oh, it's a codex system. I'm going to be paying $60 every 2 years. No, that's not the goal. I don't want that. That'll never be my focus. If I ever release a new edition, the new edition will be a meaningful set of changes. And I will do my best to quickly have everything ready to go again. I don't want to do that FOMO, hey, we're going to spend the next 6 years re-releasing all the stuff we already released. I want to have a quick transition, just to make things easier so people can play. Because everyone knows what it's like to play a tabletop role-playing game, get really into the weeds with all the expansions, and then the next edition comes out, you switch over to, and you realize that they don't have any of the stuff you want to do. They don't have any of that other stuff. I don't want that. I want you guys to be able to enjoy my game, and enjoy it in perpetuity. So, yeah. Anyhow, so as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about what walkers I want to bring over and what ones I don't. So let's take a brief moment here. We're only going for another 30 minutes, and let's figure out what mechs and what aerospace craft we're bringing over from the probably way too many I've made to the ones that I actually want to bring in. So here we go. We've got our basic little section over here, and I'm going to do a quick little doodle, just a very fast one, over the top. I recently also made the... I just want to make sure I got this right. So I have the character sheet, but I also have the walker sheet, which should be here, the construct record sheet. This is the official sheet for players who want to use walkers or aerospace. Walkers or aerospace craft. I'm so gassy. Better out than in, and I guess better out of the chimney than out of the basement. But anyhow, so this is the final sheet I'll be using. Well, there's a big section there, so when anyone wants to doodle their giant robot or put a copy of like whatever picture they want in there, they can. Should be pretty straightforward for them. And everything else is over here on the right where all their systems are and such. Should be pretty straightforward. So, now we've got that figured out, we need to figure out what we're going to be doing in terms of the mechs. So let's get over here and start seeing what we're going to be pulling over. I'm going to move the veracity out of here. So this is one of my oldest doodles for, like, standardized walkers that I've got. Like, probably one of the oldest. So I have the MacArthur, the Vassal, the Reliac, the Razorwind, and as I open up other documents, because I have no choice, that's going to be under the walker template I have here. Going to open up the General and Aftermarket. So as you guys can see, there's our MacArthur again. I've also got, I think it's an Amber Cross? The Amber Cross Forces? Yeah, the Cyclops. So the Cyclops is kind of like somewhere between the Vassal and the Vassal and the MacArthur. It's kind of a ground brawler type mech. As much as I love the Cyclops, it's very fun. It's got a little bit of like just a hair of Zeonic influence in it. And if you don't know what I mean by Zeonic, well, you know, I guess not everyone's a new type. It's fine. But yeah, I love this thing. But I suspect this is probably going to go in the extended edition of the rules. It sort of fills niches that already exist. And I don't really need multiples of them. So we're going to put the MacArthur as a big no. Just going to doodle that here. So I'm just going to take the MacArthur, I'm going to slap that thing, where the Cyclops is going to go into red because I'm not carrying it over. The MacArthur, on the other hand, I absolutely want to bring in because it's fantastic. So I'm going to go over here. We're going to doodle this out super fast, and I'm just going to very quickly have like a little reference for it. I'm going to pull this out of here. Pull this off to the side so I have a... Get out of here. There we go. Just got to shrink it a little bit. Okay. So we take this, put this at 75, and let's go crazy. So the original MacArthur was just a land-based design, but the more I've drawn it as the years have gone by, the more I kind of want it to have jump jets so it can sort of bounce around a little more. It is a digitigrade leg, and digitigrade legs are specifically designed so they can go for surprisingly large bounds and leaps. So I kind of like the idea of it just being, like, not really nimble, but capable of repositioning itself really, really well. Like, that's its big trick. So it's basically a tank that can occasionally jump jet around. So a battle mech, basically. It's a Battletech mech. Or one in the tradition of Battletech, anyway. Now, the old version that I've drawn is like the really old version. That's the old pre-Union human empire-centric variant, which is kind of made to be super mass-producible. This is the modern Union variant. which has a lot of more advanced technology under its belt. Same base tech as the original, but now you've got about 200 years worth of upgunning you can lean into. Here we go. Just gonna sort of take that. Gonna get a slightly thicker back there. And this is just me very quickly doodling out a little sketch of it. I have its little dome because its dome is very iconic. I almost always give it a missile pod because that's its bespoke loadout. The thing starts with a missile pod because it's very convenient, like a missile or a rocket pod. And we sort of just give it this. And this is just me very quickly doodling this thing. Something something Highlander burial. Yeah, exactly. Something something clans. Something something batchall. Something something Tukiad. Man, I'm sure the clans wish something something Tukiad, but no, I didn't go. It was way worse than something something Tukiad for them. Anyway, Battletech jokes aside. There we go. So we got our quick little doodle down. And then usually I give it like its cannon on the side. Its weapons are mounted on external pylons, so it gives it a surprisingly good amount of like firepower and accuracy. The ability to sort of bound about at great speed and reposition its guns. So there we go. Give it this. I usually tend to give it the one long, like, field gun that I always stick on this thing. I just think the field gun looks very good on it. Okay. So, awesome. We got ourselves the first one here, and that's the MacArthur. A human-centric design. I'm just going to slap this down under here. I'm going to do this in a font I enjoy. So recently used, we're going to use probably, I want to say nationalization's pretty good. So, alright, this is the M dash. We originally went with the 3. I feel the MV, so the Mark 5. Mark 5 MacArthur Combat Walker. Now, emphasis on the word combat here. This thing is only known as that because it was made originally for it. It's been a lot of years since this thing was first made, so it's probably used for a lot of stuff. Actually, we'll just use this font. I like this one. It works good. Font worked good. Okay, cool. I'm going to have right below, so this is Digigrade. Bounding. Cool. Might make it a little bigger so I can increase the size of this one. And then the underside here, I'll make it italic, and we'll make it halftone. There we go. That feels pretty good. Nice. Alright. So we have our MacArthur Combat Walker. Let's get on to the next one. Okay. And this is human digitigrade as well. It's a human tech base. It's kind of ubiquitous, though. So we have our MacArthur. Let me say that as green. Let's make a new one. Cool. MacArthur. We're going to fade you out into the background. So we duplicate you. Oh, nope, not what I wanted to do. There we go. Move this over here. So I have reference. Next, we're going to go with the... I figure we'll add the Vassal in, because the Vassal is a good plantigrade one. We're going to make that blue. Okay. And I'm just going to turn that off here. Call that vassal. Alright, so if we get into the actual check of this is the... I need to rework the actual text, because originally it was CHR, but nowadays the term would probably be alliance-based, so I need to go into the armory catalog, the arsenal catalog, and take a look at their weaponry. So I believe the first one I'm going to see is going to be a marksman. No, I think it's the... Where did I put you? I knew I have one of these. I have a couple of weapons that are just like perfectly union. Here we go, alliance. So the hand cannon. So the hand cannon is the ASHC-6 Eastwood Magnum. So I'm going to copy this, bring that over. Because I always like to use the same product template. It just makes things easier. So in this case, we're going to have Vassal. There we go. And this is going to be... So originally it's AS, as in Alliance. Then the next one would be usually like Sales or Alliance-like structure. In this case, we're probably dealing with Alliance Industrials, so AI. This is going to be Combat Walker. So CW / and this is where we start getting into some interesting things. This is actually where the number would usually fit. So Mark 9 is what the original Vassal is. It has been 200 years canonically since that. So I figure we're probably looking at, in 200 years, technology for the Vassal has significantly improved. It's a bleeding edge. It was originally a bleeding edge walker. And nowadays, it's a little bit less of a bleeding edge, but it still works pretty well. So I would say this thing is probably in its mark, I want to say 13. It's been revised a couple times since then. Okay, there we go. So the AICW Mark 13 Vassal Combat Walker. Human tech base, plantigrade. Alright. So let's get our actual doodle going. And I'm going to pull the MacArthur up here just to make sure I've got, like, rough parity in terms of size. Okay. So what we're looking at here is plantigrade legs. Plantigrade means you stand on your actual, like, soles of your feet. Basically, digigrade means you stand on your toes. So, in this case, these have a very flat foot. Here we go. Very thick thighs on this thing. This is an actual combat walker built for frontline combat. Has 2 big toes. So a little bit of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in there. Just a hair. There we go. And then we have the actual center torso. So it can't be super tall because it's only a little bit bigger in terms of its height than the MacArthur, and that's only because the MacArthur is literally squatting. So this is a little more of the Titanfall mech. Or if anyone's ever played, God, what's the name of it? Lost Planet, Extreme Condition, or Lost Planet 2. Lost Planet 2 is legitimately gold. I highly recommend it. Lost Planet 1 was a little bit... wasn't bad, but I thought the pacing wasn't that great. Lost Planet 2 was incredible. It was truly a Capcom game, and I loved it to death. But it's still that kind of, like, Titanfall-esque sort of walker. Now, this is because, for the record, as far as how, like, constructs and stuff tend to work in Legacy, they tend to be built in orbital foundries and fired at a planet. Literally not unlike Titanfall mechs. And in fact, that's actually a huge part of how combat works in Legacy. open warfare isn't usually won by whoever's like pushes successfully over the most ground. It's whoever can manufacture the most mechs, and then during a high attrition battle, out-manufacture their opponent before they realize they have to pull back. Most pilots usually don't die in mech combat, unless someone's actively headhunting for the actual cockpit. In which case, then, well, sure, but then you're the guy who's, dick punching, and then everyone's gonna punch your dick. So, just be aware of that. Big stompy bot. Yeah, exactly. Still sitting at roughly about, 20 feet, 25 feet, I believe, for this one. A little more gorilla-ish than some of the other ones. Okay, then we have the head. Which I tend to add in about there. So let's add a little bit of the eyes, just so we have a good silhouette of it. There we go. We can add in the correct shape of the head. So this is a pretty humanoid mech. It's probably about as humanoid a mech as you're gonna get outside of an Avatar. Where you start getting into, this is actually made to mimic someone's actual physical form for practical reasons. There we go. And I'm going to add just a little bit of, outlining onto this. So I'll put this at, 45. There we go. Just getting some detail in on this biz. Okay. Give them those two shiny eyes, since it sort of sets them apart a little bit from MacArthur, which is known for having one big visor eye. Basically, they have a security camera head. Okay, just taking some looks at some old designs and drawings I have here. Okay, that works. And then I just sort of got these plates here. There we go. So that gives us a pretty good idea of what the head looks like, more or less. We got that big torso. We got a little bit of a Buzz Lightyear chassis going on here. So a lot of human mechs actually have this little, series of open panel. This little open panel on the top left of the torso. It's actually where you can access a lot of the diagnostic systems. But it also has a secondary scanning array in case someone blows the head off. Just makes things easier. And this is me just getting a little detail so I can work off of it later. There we go. We got ourselves our external chassis more or less in place here. Because it's been a hot minute since I've drawn this thing in any level of detail. Then we have grab this. There we go. Give it that dong plate, because protecting your hips is actually really important. Let no one tell you otherwise. There we go. Then we need to get the knee joints in place. Then we get I usually like a round kneecap armor plate. This is an old holdout from when I first started drawing robots back when I was younger. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of just like the style of it. It gives a little bit of character to the mechs, no matter what I do. There we go. Then we get the lower leg armor in place. And this gives us a pretty good gauge as to what they look like. So mechs at this scale are, I kind of don't want to say like cute, but they're designed to be just a little bit more like kind of friendly, a little bit looking on my end. This is because this sort of gives a place to build up the mechs into. So when you get to the really crazy mech designs, you're like, okay, now I can start making these things look really menacing and terrifying. If you start right from the start, from like the get-go on making these things look horrific, you really don't have anywhere to build up to. And that was sort of an issue I had with earlier mech designs in the setting. I didn't really have like a step up above where players were starting at. And that didn't read as right to me. Okay, so this gives us a pretty good gauge. I kind of want to rotate him a little bit. Hello? That was weird. What is out there? There's like a thing out here. And I don't know where it is, but it's being weird. Okay, now if I click it... Yeah, there we go. It's like, what the hell? It was so weirdly large out there. Okay, I'm also going to grab this a little bit. I'm going to slightly move it up and re-angle it a little. There we go. Get the posture a little bit more normalized. So, okay, so we've got the Vassal, which that's more or less good enough. I don't need to add too much more detail to it. We're just going to add the very simple boxy arms. And then the backs of the wrists. Cool. Okay, that'll do. So we've got ourselves our Vassal, which I'm going to save this as Final Walker Catalog. Bring that to 100%. So that's 2. I'm going to add just a teeny bit of detail onto this while I still remember to. Hello? Oh, hold on. I see what happened. It was being weird. Okay, we got it. And we do the same thing here. Okay. There are some elements I want to keep from the old design on this thing. Not all of them. There's a lot of stuff that really should have stayed on the drawing board. But one of the things I want to keep is the flexing abdominal section. I'm going to keep the design of the upper torso. I kind of like that it's got that sort of fiddler crab-y kind of look. You'll see it in a couple of mech designs from across, like, different places. I think there's actually a guy who just straight up calls, like, the one he draws the fiddler crab. And I think it's, like, actually the one that started this aesthetic. But it's a very Battletech kind of, like, design, and I sort of dig that. There we go. Then we get this. Just so I have some little detail to draw off of. Cool. Here we go, and we just sort of give it the top of the missile launcher, and then the outer thing. That works. I tend to keep their knees exposed for the MacArthur, because this is one of the oldest designs that humanity's made as far as mechs go. So I kind of like the more primitive look that it gives it. Makes it feel a little bit more rustic, I guess. That'd be a nice term for it. Old and busted is probably the slightly less generous term for it. Okay, let me sort of take that down a little bit. Cool. So that gives us a pretty decent shape. A pretty solid shape language to work with here. Cool. So we have the MacArthur, the Vassal. So plantigrade, digitigrade. We still have, out of the different mech types, we have hexapod, we have gyro wheel, float wing, and tread leg. Those are the big 6, if you add in the digitigrade and plantigrade. So I want to offer 5 of them, I think. Tread leg's kind of a little bit over-the-top heavy. Maybe I do make one of each. What do you guys think? Do we have one of each movement type, or do I leave one of them out? Because I feel like having 6 mechs available to jockeys is a pretty good baseline. And that'll also let players and GMs tinker around with them a fair bit too. Let me know your comments right now. 6 is good, I think? I think so too. Okay, so let's do that then. So we have digitigrade. We have plantigrade. So now we have a couple other mechs to bring over. We have the gyro wheel, which is the Reliac, which is incredibly fun. So I'm just going to do another quick doodle on this thing. So I'm going to take the Vassal, bring it down here. We're going to reduce the opacity on this thing significantly. Bring it down to like 32. MacArthur, we're going to move to the left a little bit. Bring that down to 21. We're going to duplicate the MacArthur. Okay. Bring that to 100. Cool. So this is made by Clan Mumathan of the Click and their internal house foundry. So they have their own system of writing it down. So this would be the... This is the Reliac XX 13. General Service Walker. So, General Service, because these things are used by the Click for damn near everything. So this is going to be a gyro wheel design. Too much will give us decision paralysis? I think so. I don't want to give any more than that. I figure what I'll do is I'll provide 6 mech options for players in the core book. I'll provide 3 aerospace craft options. Maybe a 4th if I want to throw in the Acris one, so we have a true interceptor. And, yeah, because we have... If I pop over to the aerospace template that we had earlier, out of the ones that I currently have, I have basically a grunt, like, pickup truck for one of them. This is literally like the lander. The lander. You actually will see it in several images of the book. In fact, actually, even in the document I showed you guys here earlier with the crawl, there's actually one approaching in the distance. Way back there, but it's there. So that's actually one of the Tortugas. As I pop back over. So you have the Galapagos. You have the Cricket, which is kind of the more like personal, nimbly, pimbly, high-speed, get in and out kind of one. You have the sports car, basically. You have the Falsetto, which is more of like a Pelican-style gunship. It's made for moving into dangerous environments, gunning things down, extracting people in and out. But it's basically a gunship that just happens to be a lander. It has the capacity to carry stuff, but it's really more about carrying weapons. The Cricket doesn't carry much of anything but its passengers. That's like an internally good size for like passenger carrying, but other than that. Whereas this thing is like a bus. So we have varying levels of carrying capacity, and I don't have anything just for dogfighting. So I think what we'll do is we'll bring in from the Walker record sheet that I had here. Where was it? It was the... Here we go. I guess it's this one, yes. I guess we'll bring in the Razorwind and throw that in with the aerospace craft, and we'll call that a win. So that works for me. So the next one of our walkers is the Reliac, which I can just quickly take care of this. Alright. So let's get our doodle on super quick. And I'll probably finish more of this up at another time. This is just a good place to start. Okay. And I'm going to again take those constructs over here to the side where I can reference them as I'm drawing, because it's much easier to draw with a reference even of your own stuff. And anyone who says people don't use references is wrong and not an artist. So, yeah. Whoop, hold on. There we go. Motherfucker. That's more like it. There we go. So these things are basically the Hailfire droids from the Clone Wars, because I just loved the way that the body hung between the wheels. I thought that was a very cool idea. And so I figured, let's keep it. Let's bring that into this sort of design. I thought it was just a really visually stunning kind of look. And so we sort of have it working off of that. So it's actually got this series of plates, not unlike a tank tread, but each of the individual flat plates articulates, which means it can sort of slide from side to side and change its footing, which gives it surprisingly good stability on uneven terrain. It makes gyro wheels some of the fastest mechs, but also some of the least stable mechs. Not in terms of the ability to get knocked over, they're damn near impossible to. Anyone who's ever seen a hamster wheel knows that's not really easy to do. But far more along the lines of it actually makes it easier for them to get battered about. So other mechs can sort of throw them and toss them and skid them about. And they can't really stop it. They can, like, recover from it, but it's their biggest vulnerability, I think. Okay, I'm going to take this slightly twisted. Why does it keep doing that? What the fuck is going on out here on this end? Oh, I see why. Okay, hold on. It's like a thing way out on the edge. There we go. Let's not go back here. We should be good. There we are. I'm going to slightly turn it, tilt it just a hair. Put the big body in the middle, which is pretty straightforward. It's basically just this big chunky boy hovering in the middle of these parts. It's got a pair of little limbs that dangle down. Little manipulators. And it's got the two big turrets on its back. Okay, we can carve down these turrets a little bit. Get them to the shape I want them to be in. This is where the majority of the weapons on this thing go. So it's got a moderate it's got like a moderate carrying capacity for equipment. But like a lot of Click, it does run into the issue of it needs to be bolted onto their frame. For the Click, they need like weapon adapters to actually carry a lot of the same gear used by the rest of the galaxy. For their mechs, it's really more just a matter of, like, it needs to be hardpoint mounted. They can't really do a lot of, like, carry stuff by their manipulators kind of thing. Here we go. We do the same thing on the other side. And they sort of have this leg assembly that comes down to a central point. This large central axis, this axle that comes down into the body. And that will do nicely. Sort of pull that up on the other side. I'm debating just making the wheels rubberized, but I really like the idea of the articulating plates. I just think it's very cool. So kind of like giant bike wheels, really. Okay, I'm just going to put these on there just so we have some reference. We're probably going to be calling the stream very shortly, because I've been going for about 2 hours. And I usually don't go much further than that on YouTube. YouTube's algorithm is not kind to long-form content. So, which I get. Not everyone has the time or energy to, like, get through that much. So, makes sense. It's like the one thing YouTube does where I'm like, no, that's fair. Everything else YouTube does, pretty bad. But that, no, I get it. I 100% get it. It makes perfect sense. Okay, then we're just going to sort of take that down to a point. And this is where I start adding the hexagonal neck plates in. There we go. They kind of got like a little bit of a Superman face going. And then they got these little optics that are just very weird for everyone else. Kind of got a little bit of like a sad face or a oh kind of surprise face in there. Just a little oh face. There we go. We bring that in. Bring that around on the other side. Same thing here. Pull that around. Then you have the chassis sort of come to a point on the bottom. And beautiful. Okay. A quick doodle of Aureliac. More or less. Not quite perfect, but it will do for now. Nice. Alright, I'm kind of digging that. I think that looks pretty good. This will do for now for, like, the Cliff Notes version of what I gotta bring in. Okay, and that's about the right scale, too. It's actually pretty beefy. The thing's pretty large compared to a lot of other walkers. That's mostly because the wheels are so wide. When you actually factor in its body, it's not much bigger than any other mech of its class. Okay, that'll do. So if we take all these together, I should probably think I want to shrink it just a little bit. Okay, yeah, I'm going to shrink this just a teensy little bit to bring it to scale parity with the others. There we go. Just a little bit smaller. But that should do nicely. Okay, cool. So given everything we've got, these are the mechs currently going into Legacy, and there will be, at very least, 3 more that will be happening soon. So thank you guys so much for your tuning in. I appreciate you. We're going to do more of these Omni makes every weekend, you know, every other weekend until the game comes out. So keep an eye out, or at least until I get my campaign back on track. That will eventually return. And when that happens, I'll probably be actually starting to drop the proper vlog videos on here. The actually edited down, like, I'm hoping to make them 20 to 30 minutes at most, so they're a little more digestible. But we'll see how it goes. In the meantime, thank you all so much. I appreciate you all endlessly. You're all incredible. And thank you again to my awesome Patreon. Remember, patrons, You guys are going to be the ones to get the beta first and for free. And for anyone who wants to support the channel, this is the best way to do it. But in the meantime, also don't forget to like, subscribe, comment. I'm a tiny channel. This helps me grow. The more you like and subscribe, the better it'll go. And, in the meantime, thank you again, Eppersan, Atlas, Heinrich, Necrodomus, Souls Rolls, and the mighty Mossy. And to everyone else out there, thank you for tuning in to Omni Makes. I'll see you guys next time. Take care, Voyagers. Peace.